Hawkins Middle School, and we're in Belfair. And we're in the library, and you have about 50 eighth graders. We combined our two classes. This is Jennifer Matthews, and I'm Wynn. And we combined our two classes to be able to meet with you. And so when we get homework or when we're doing work to try and get the bill passed, you'll have about 50 kids helping.
Wonderful.
And then I haven't introduced them. I haven't even introduced you to them at all. So you could probably tell them who you are and maybe what type of lobbyist you are and kind of do an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And can folks hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, great. Well, good morning, Hawkins. My name is Emily Murphy. I am a contract lobbyist. So I work on behalf of what I call public interest clients. Can anybody take a guess at what a public interest client might be? It's kind of a fancy term. Yeah, go ahead. What do you think?
Is it like random people that come and they think they know what's like better for people?
That's one way of putting it, sure. Anybody else have a guess at what public interest might mean?
You have contracts with others?
I do. I have contracts. So when I say public interest, I'm making a distinction between the public and the private sector. So it's kind of a general terminology, but my clients tend to be nonprofit organizations, okay? So a nonprofit organization would be something like, for example, one of my clients is the Children's Alliance, right? So their mission is not to make money, but it's to advocate on behalf of kids, and there's a particular tax designation that comes along with that. But my clients are mostly social and human services, meaning everything from kids, specifically around early learning issues and healthcare for low-income kids and kids of color, to working on behalf of elderly facilities that help serve long-term care needs of our vulnerable elders, and then a number of different types of clients in between, some retired union members, et cetera. So I come from more of what we call the social and human services perspective, as opposed to, say, business, right? There's a number of lobbyists that their sort of area of expertise tends to be business, right? So you have your Microsofts, right? Raise your hand if you've heard of Microsoft. There you go, right? Or Boeing, right? These are larger companies. So I do contract lobbying, which is different than what we call in-house lobbying. So on the one hand, you have in-house lobbyists. In-house meaning somebody's an employee. So going back to Microsoft, Microsoft will have a number of staff members that work for Microsoft that also lobby in the legislature, right? That's an in-house lobbyist. I am what's called a contract lobbyist, which means I am not a staff member. I'm not an employee of a particular organization. Instead, I have my own company. It's called Emily Murphy Strategies. And various companies or nonprofit organizations will hire me as an independent contractor to represent them. So instead of being an employee of Microsoft and just working for Microsoft, Microsoft could decide to contract with me, as well as the Children's Alliance, as well as United Way or a group like that. So I have multiple clients instead of just being a staff member for one client. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. And I'll just say a few other words. So I'm one of the younger lobbyists here. I'm 29 years old. I would guess that the average age of most lobbyists is probably in the 60s. And so as a young woman, I have kind of a distinct experience here. I come to the lobbying work partly because I used to work as a grassroots activist. Who knows what what is a grassroots activist? Any ideas? Any thoughts?
No.
So grassroots usually refers to very community, sort of organic organizing and mobilizing for social change work. So I used to work with low-income tenants. I used to work with low-income immigrant groups trying to organize for their rights, human rights, social justice issues, racial equity. And so it was working in community, doing advocacy to try to make laws better, to try to make local ordinances better, that I started to work more with lawmakers, with folks who are directly impacted by issues, really being the ones whose voices were the main driver of the policy that we worked on. And through that process, through different processes, I started to work with lawmakers, build relationships, really, really enjoyed being able to see how people with particular stories, whether it was, I'll never forget the mom sitting down with a city council member explaining that she couldn't turn the lights off at night. Her kids had to sleep with the lights on and were getting tired in class, falling asleep because they slept with the lights on all night. Because if she turned the lights off, you know what would happen? Cockroaches would come streaming out of the walls and start crawling on her kids' faces because she lived in such substandard housing, and she was there to talk to the council members about why they needed to improve housing quality. And so hearing stories like that really change people's hearts and minds and get policy passed was really inspiring to me. And so I got into lobbying as a way to help fight for what I considered to be right, to be issues of human rights and justice. So that's my background. A lot of lobbyists come from sort of a business perspective where they're, kind of coming from that approach, but I'm really anchored and inspired by the stories of people who are hurting and suffering and deserve a fair shake. So I'll stop there and see what kind of questions you guys have and what you're working on.
So, do you want to tell what bill we have?
Sure. Sorry.
No problem.
We were voting on bills, as we said to you, and the bill that the class set to work on was
House Bill 1333. Any score of a 3 on an AP high school test will be accepted for college credit. And we did a little bit of research on it, and it looks like each university in Washington State now sets the standard for what AP class scores they're going to receive and how much credit they get.
Interesting.
And the medical marijuana did come in second in schools. So that was that was the one that got the second amount of votes. Do you know what number 3 was? Okay. The other one the kids were interested in was that all public schools will have an emergency panic button.
Okay.
We did go with the majority vote for House Bill 1333. And I checked on it right before we came in, and it looks like the bill is still alive, and it was in a committee on higher education on February 17th last week.
Okay.
So we'll let the kids maybe come up and ask some questions, and then as a teacher, it would be great if you could give us some ideas for what homework we could do or how we could help get the bill passed between now and when we meet with you next.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, perfect. And thanks for volunteering to do this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We have an afternoon group that had a lobbyist assigned, and so Mrs. Matthews and I were, really wanted all of our kids to have the same experience, which really ties right in with what you were saying about what your work is. So we really appreciate getting a second lobbyist assigned to our school.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what's ready to go first?
Hi, I'm Emmett California. My question is how many bills have you helped pass along, and how many bills have you helped pass the law? Helped passed along into a law?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. It's a pretty straightforward question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it. I can think of at least 4 or no, probably more like probably around 10. I think that one of the things about lobbying is, a lot of lobbyists, we work in coalition with other people, okay? So I might have a client that really, really cares about a certain thing. you know, it's a top priority. So for example, I'll give you a real world example. One of my clients is a nonprofit organization called the Children's Alliance, okay? And we have a number of things we really put a lot of our focus on. Access to dental care is one of them. Access to high quality early learning is another one. Okay, so we focus most of my time on those issues. There are also a lot of other issues in the legislature that we support, right? Less of my time is dedicated to some of those other issues because there are other organizations and other groups and other stakeholders that really focus on that. So for example, there are a lot of lobbyists and organizations that work on child welfare, okay? So kids in the foster care system, really, really important issues. We have to make sure that our foster kids are well supported and have the resources they need. So around things like foster care issues, my client, the Children's Alliance, will have me do some work to support our partners who are leading that work, but it's not always where I spend all of my time and attention. So when bills like that pass, let's say there's something to improve outcomes for foster kids, right? I don't know if I can necessarily count that as a bill that I've helped pass. Other people were leading on it, but maybe I have a couple conversations with legislators here and there. So I think things that I was sort of the lead on as the lead organization of the lead lobbyist, I'd say probably about 10 or 15 bills, somewhere around there. I'd be happy to tell you about them, but if you want to just know the number, then that's it.
I have a follow-up question to that. So
Great.
how many bills have you helped try to get into a law but have not actually worked out? And over lose to win ratio is also a helpful one.
Yeah. So sorry, was the last part of your question, what's sort of the win-loss ratio? So man, that's a great question. So, you know, as you guys are probably learning, right, the process in the legislature is really designed to sort of weed out bills. It's sort of like a funnel, right? You start with a huge amount of bills being introduced, and there's various sort of checkpoints along the way where bills die, right? There's not enough time, there's not enough support, they're too political, they're too expensive, whatever it is. So the bills just kind of wean down until you get that small trickle that actually become law. So my win-loss ratio is probably, for every bill that gets signed into law, for the number of bills that, you know, my clients and I are generally supporting or working on, it's probably, I would say 8 to 10 losses for every one victory. And that's very general guess, but a lot of that has to do with just the design of the legislative process, not necessarily, you know, how good of a lobbyist you are. Or so I tell myself.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Which that kind of fits with my question. We talked about 2,000 bills are getting filed right now, and about 200 of them might get passed. And ask Jennifer, do you have something? Okay, go.
Hi, my name is Quincy, and my question is, what is your favorite part of your job?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, go Hawks, love the shirt. Second of all, what is my favorite part of my job? Well, I'm gonna give you a lobbyist answer and actually say two things. One of my favorite parts of my job is seeing people be empowered, is seeing people who are directly impacted by something, who have had a really challenging experience, come down to Olympia, meet with their legislators, maybe testify in front of committee, but really share their story. Because as you guys just heard, right, there are thousands of bills that are introduced. And for so many legislators and so many people, they're just numbers, they're line items, they're you know, commas and decimal points in the budget. They really lack that human context. And so for me, when I see people come down, when I see moms come down who have struggled with homelessness and drug addiction, but cleaned up their lives with the help of certain social and human service programs, and are now here to talk about how important it is that we fund those things so that other parents and other families have the ability to help climb out of poverty. It's really powerful stuff. And as much as I would like to think, and other lobbyists would like to think, that so much of what changes, so much of what helps get bills passed is, our hard work, I've really seen those stories change people's hearts and minds. I had the ability a few years back to work on a great piece of legislation that did get signed into law. It was called the Washington State DREAM Act, and it enables young people, regardless of their immigration status, to be able to have access to state-based financial aid. So the background was that a lot of, if you are an undocumented immigrant or if you are a non-citizen, you are categorically denied financial aid from the federal government and from the state government, which means if you're a really smart kid, you apply to college and you get accepted, you have to pay for everything without financial aid from the state or the federal government. So we thought that was really unfair. We thought students should be able to be able to go to college and have access to financial aid. But seeing these young folks come down week after week, year after year, saying, really risking their, in a lot of ways, risking their lives, fear of deportation, to be able to say, I have a 4.0, I'm the worship leader at my church, I'm the JROTC captain. All I want is the ability to go to college just like everybody else in my class, just like my family moved here for. That's what changed the equation in the legislature. It wasn't lobbyists, right? So seeing people share their stories and really seeing the power that has on legislators, and seeing those stories really turn into life-changing laws for people is one of my favorite things. What else? I think the other part of my job that I like the most is that things move really, really fast down here. A lot of times it feels like the progress that you might make in like a month's time during interim, which is when the legislature isn't in session, right? Because it only meets a few months out of the year. The work in interim, the progress that you might make on a particular issue that could take 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Some days down here during legislative session, when it's just bang, 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 sometimes you get a month's worth of work done in a day. And it's just because those conversations happen fast. Everybody's on the same campus, sort of like at your school, right? And so there's lots of touch points, and it just moves really fast. And I really like that. I sometimes joke that it's my little hamster wheel I get to run on, right? And I like that sort of quick pace, and it makes it really interesting, never a dull moment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nick, and I was wondering, what kind of college do you have to go through to be a lobbyist?
A great question. And did you say your name was Nick?
Yes.
Great question, Nick. So there is no education requirement to be a lobbyist. I think that maybe there's certain types of classes that are helpful. But one of the things I actually really love about this job is that people, lobbyists, come to the legislature, come to lobbying with all sorts of different background. Some lobbyists are experts in healthcare, right? They know about insurance, they know about billing, they know all about healthcare law, and that's their area of expertise. Maybe they don't know anything about environmentalist policies or tax policy, right? But they know about healthcare. Well, that makes them really, really valuable at that subject, and maybe that's the subject they focus on. I went to college. I was fortunate enough to go to college. I went to undergrad, so I got a BA, a Bachelor of Arts, so a 4-year undergrad degree like you would get from UW or another school. So I don't have any specialized training in terms of a law degree, right? I'm not a lawyer, and you don't need to be. I think it can be helpful to have that legal training. I think it could definitely be helpful. I think some people, that can be helpful, but it's not necessary to be a lobbyist. Like I said, I come from a social justice background, right? Community organizing. Like President Obama was a community organizer right in the South Side of Chicago. I am not like President Obama, to be sure, but right, it's that kind of background that brought me here. There are some people who are corporate lawyers or were CEOs that have come to this work. So there's a lot of different life experience that makes people successful at lobbying and at what we call government affairs. So I think it's great because people from all sorts of different walks of life can get involved. Really what you need is to care, be a quick study, to be able to read legislation and to be able to figure out and summarize, and then really to just be persuasive when you talk to a lawmaker. Usually I get about 45 seconds to convince somebody about why they should do a particular thing. Like I said, things move fast. So legislators' attention spans are short, and you have to just be able to make points. It's not about how technical you can get, because that tunes people out, right? You have to be able to be persuasive and sort of speak at a pretty basic level. I don't have to know all the answers. My clients that hire me, they're the experts in issues, right? I have to have enough information that I can speak persuasively. And if I don't know the answer to a technical question, I can get back to a legislator, and it's really important that I follow up quickly, but I don't have to be an expert in every single issue. I have to know enough about it to be able to be persuasive.
And then my other one was, I don't remember what my other one was.
It's all good.
Make the Capitol tour.
So on March 15th, we're taking a tour of the Capitol building.
Great.
Our tours, it's like 10 to 1, and we were wondering if you would meet us there.
I would love to. Would you have your teacher send me an email with that information? I don't have my calendar right in front of me, but I believe that's, maybe a Thursday or Wednesday or Thursday. So I would love to if my schedule allows. Yeah, at some point I should be able to meet up with you guys.
Yeah, she said she'll email you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while she's talking, if anybody has a question that they want to jot down and just raise their hand, we'll come check it. Because maybe questions are coming up that the ones that you haven't.
Hi, my name's Alyssa.
Hi there.
My question is, what's the hardest law you've helped pass?
The hardest law. Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think there's a few different ways that you could sort of measure how hard a law is to pass. I think one of the ways you could measure it would be, how much opposition was there. So I think one of the bills that I told you about before, the Washington State Dream Act that I told you about, that was a multi-year process. So it's uncommon in the legislature that a bill will just get introduced and then pass that same year. It does happen, but sometimes issues that are more sensitive or have a lot of political controversy can take many years. So yeah, I think the Washington State Dream Act was probably the hardest bill I've ever passed. It was also probably the most rewarding. There was a number of people who were concerned that their local constituents would be very disapproving of them voting to extend public benefits, so college financial aid, the eligibility for college financial aid to undocumented folks, right? This is probably an issue that you've seen a lot in the news, right? Certainly it's has an uptick now under the new administration, the new presidential administration. But there were a number of legislators that were concerned that their constituents would be disapproving of expanding access to higher education, to financial aid for undocumented folks. The counter argument we got was, well, folks should just come here legally and we shouldn't reward bad behavior. Of course, we know that our immigration system is broken. There isn't really a line people can even get into because the system is so broken. So I won't get into all the talking points of that bill, but we had a unanimous support from Democrats, basically from day one. And the process was really, how could we figure out how to bring enough Republicans on board? And we were able to do that. There were a number of Republicans who took a very strong supportive stand, who have large immigrant communities and who knew that this was really the right thing to do, not just from a sort of humanitarian perspective, but really from the economic benefits. There's no reason to deny people the ability to capitalize on a quality education. We know that job earnings are way higher, the ability to pay taxes and whatnot if you're well educated. So looking at it in terms of a global workforce issue and the economic benefits of making sure that we had all of our brightest students able to go to college was what really brought people around.
Thank you. What is the easiest bill you've passed?
The easiest bill I've passed. Oh man. It's a good question. I worked on a bill a few years ago called the State Seal of Biliteracy, which was a bill that basically rewarded people who speak multiple languages. So whether you're an immigrant student and you master your own home language and English, or you're a native English speaker and, maybe, how many of you take a foreign language? Raise your hand if you take a foreign language.
They don't take foreign language until high school.
Oh, until high school. That's right. I'm sorry. So if you're in high school and you take a foreign language and you, there's a few different things, but let's say you pass an AP test or you demonstrate proficiency, right? You actually get a seal, this cool sort of gold star, if you will, on your high school transcript that says that you've mastered, that you are biliterate. And so that was really cool because it helps make students more attractive for college entrance, right? So I remember one young lady who was a native Spanish speaker, and her dream was to be a bilingual doctor so that she could work with Spanish-speaking patients as well as English-speaking patients, and that this was something that would help her be able to be a more competitive applicant into medical school, right? Because she has that that benefit of being bilingual, which is something we know a lot of people want. But I had a couple legislators that just absolutely believed in the bill. And so it didn't have a lot of opposition. And so it just passed each committee with strong votes. And we got it done that year. And, I don't know that I'd say that it was easy, but I would say it might have been one of the easier bills that I've worked on.
And then I have one more question. What does a day in your job look like?
Man, good question. One of the reasons I love this job is because every day is a little bit different. Some days I have to testify in front of committee, right? So I have a bill up before the Early Learning Committee or before Ways and Means, which is the fiscal committee that a lot of bills have to go through. So I'll have to testify, right? I'll have to go in front of the committee, a bunch of legislators and talk about why my client supports a bill or doesn't support a bill. Meetings with legislators. So meetings down here tend to be 15-minute increments, right? So you got to pack a lot into 15 minutes. So I'll have a variety of meetings, attending other public hearings, even if I'm not testifying. So right before this, I was in the finance committee tracking a bill that one of my clients supports. And what else? Coalition meetings, right? So remember I said a lot of different lobbyists, most lobbyists don't just work on an issue by themselves. There's usually other groups that care about an issue. So coalition meetings where we talk about what different things people care about, hearings, testifying. I try to get lunch in somewhere in the middle of the day at some point. But it's a lot of running around, right? So I'm in this committee this minute, and then I'm up the stairs talking to this person. It's a lot of walking and talking. Sometimes my meetings with legislators are not sit-down meetings, but I catch them coming out of a committee or going into a committee, and we have a quick interaction in the hallway. Can I count on you for a yes vote on this bill? Would you mind amending this? A lot of email, right? Tracking bills and paying attention to the information that's coming to and from, all very fast. A lot of it's word of mouth, some of it's signals and emails. So, okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions, you guys.
Someone want to ask me what we could do to help her get our
Right, so I'm Zane Michelle. My question is, how hard do you think it would be for us to get our bill passed?
Yeah. And remind me what the bill is that you're looking at?
House Bill 1333. Any score of a 3 on an AP high school test will be accepted for college credit.
Yeah, that's great. And I have to look up this bill, and if your teacher could just remind me of the bill in the email that you send me, that would be great. Am I right that currently you have to have a 4 on an AP test to get credit? Is that what?
Yeah.
4. So what the bill does is it changes it from a 4 to a 3.
Well,
right?
The thing is, colleges, they would have to accept with this bill passed.
Right.
So you get a 3 on a college and they could accept you, but that'd be their choice. With this, they'd have to accept you.
Sure. Yeah. So that's a good question. I mean, can you tell me, I don't know if it says on your piece of paper, I need to look at the bill, who the prime sponsor is, meaning what legislator's name is at the top of the bill?
Or we looked at in our class, but we just don't remember.
We looked at it in our class, but we don't remember.
Okay, no problem. So I think that's a really good bill for you guys to pick. I think it's going to be challenging. You know, I don't know the issue very well. I'll look into it for you guys for sure before our next session. But the questions that come to my head as somebody who hasn't worked on this issue very much is, you know, who might oppose the bill, right? A bill will pass if there's no opposition to it and it doesn't cost a ton of money, right? This bill doesn't sound like it's going to cost a lot of money, right? It's not creating some sort of new program that costs money. It's a policy change. So who would be opposed to the policy? I would be curious to see what the university systems think of this, right? If they made an argument, and I don't know this, don't quote me on this, but if they made an argument that it somehow lowered the standard, right? Or it watered down, right, people's sort of expertise, then that, and they came out and opposed to it, and there was conflict, right? That makes it harder for it to pass. So I think one of the questions would be what organizations oppose it, and how powerful are they? But I think that it's a good bill, and I'm looking at it now. It's 1333, is that right? Or 1336, did you say?
1333.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it, and it's a bipartisan bill. Yeah, it's moving through the process. So I think that's a great bill that you guys have chosen to work on. Yeah, it's definitely moving through the process. So I know we have to wrap up here. The teachers had suggested some things that I might offer as homework assignments. Is that right? Or are you guys all set for the week?
I think they meant like things that we can do to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say contacting legislators is always a good idea. Okay. So if you haven't already, maybe come up with 2 or 3 reasons that you think this bill is a good idea, whatever they are, okay? And then I would say contact the sponsors of the bill. So the people who have, as you look on the website, the people who have listed their names as sponsors. And have you guys spent any time on the Washington legislature website, the bill tracking website at all?
Yeah, we did all our research on the bills on that website.
Awesome. So you guys are well familiar with it. So I would say do 2 things. 1, send an email to the sponsors and say, thank you for sponsoring this bill, right? Have you guys already done that?
No.
Nope. So let them know you're supportive, right? And ask them what you can do. The other thing is I would say, find out who your legislators are. And you can do that if you type into Google, find my legislator, or maybe it's on the Capitol Classroom webpage, but find who your own legislators are that represent your district, right? There's an old saying, all politics is local. Your constituents, you guys are the boss, right? So I would say kindly ask your own legislators for their support. And you might even find that your own legislators are actually co-sponsors of this bill, right? So, so figure out who your own legislators are, and then cross-check that with who the sponsors are, if you haven't already, and then email them or call them and give them those 2 or 3 top reasons that you think this bill is good. And then in the lobbying world, we always say, make an ask. What does that mean? Ask them something concrete, a yes or no. Can we count on your support? Can you, yeah, so I think that would be a great place to start.
Thank you.
Thank you. These are great questions, you guys. I'm really impressed.
Anybody want to tell her thank you and say goodbye?
Thank you for.
Thank you.
All thank you.
Yeah, keep up the good work, guys. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much. Take your time out. Yeah, thank you for volunteering.
Absolutely.